The scream echoed through crystal spires. Not a scream of death. Something worse. A scream of someone being kept alive. In the dark city of Kamaraz, pain has currency. Suffering pays rent. And the Dark Eldar are very, very rich. The prisoner hangs suspended in a web of razored wire. Each breath draws the blades deeper. Each heartbeat feeds the city's hunger. The Archon watches with ancient eyes. 10,000 years old. 10,000 years of this. Please, the prisoner whispers. The Archon smiles, teeth like broken glass. Please what? Please stop? Please kill you? The prisoner nods frantically. Blood drips onto obsidian floors. But then you'd be useless to me. The air tastes of copper and ozone, of terror crystallized into art. This is Kamara, the dark city, where an entire civilization survives by drinking anguish like wine. The prisoner was a soldier once, fought for the Emperor, believed in honor. Now he's livestock. The Archon gestures. Homunculi emerge from shadows. Their surgical tools gleam with anticipation. We're going to take you apart. The Archon purrs. Very slowly, very carefully. And when we're done, we'll put you back together. The prisoner's eyes widen, so we can do it again. The Dark Eldar feed on souls. Not metaphorically, literally. Every scream extends their lives. Every broken mind delays their damnation. They are the most advanced species in the galaxy. Masters of technology that makes gods weep, and they use it all for torture. The prisoner tries to speak. The Archon leans closer. What's that? Why? The prisoner gasps. The Archon's smile falters. For just a moment. Because if we stop, she who thirsts will claim us all. The city pulses around them, alive, hungry, built from the bones of 1,000 civilizations. The homunculi begin their work. The prisoner screams again. The city feeds. But this is just one soul, one small meal. In the depths of Kamara, millions more hang in similar webs, an infinite harvest of agony. The Dark Eldar call it survival. The rest of the galaxy calls it something else. But what drives an entire species to become monsters? What terror could be so great that eternal damnation seems preferable? What created the Dark Eldar? In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there's only war. But before the screaming, before the torture chambers that stretch across entire worlds, before the dark city of Kamarag became a monument to suffering itself, the Dark Eldar were gods. For 65 million years, the Eldar Empire ruled the galaxy like immortal children with infinite toys. Their psychic powers could reshape reality with a thought. Their technology made stars dance to their whims. Death was optional. Pain was negotiable. They had everything, and that was the problem. When you can have anything, when pleasure becomes as easy as breathing, when every desire can be fulfilled with the snap of your fingers, what happens to your soul? The ancient Eldar found out. They pushed further, deeper, into sensations that would drive lesser species mad. They built entire worlds dedicated to experiences so intense, so overwhelming, that reality itself began to buckle under the weight of their appetites. The smell of burning incense mixed with something darker in their pleasure palaces. The temperature rose not from fires, but from the friction of 1 billion souls grinding against the fabric of space itself. The texture of silk gave way to rougher things, sharper things. And in the warp, something stirred. Something that fed on excess. On the screams that came after pleasure turned to pain. On the moment when ecstasy became agony, and the victim realized they couldn't tell the difference anymore. The Eldar felt it watching them. this thing they were creating with their endless hunger. Some tried to warn their people. The craft world Eldar saw the signs, the way shadows moved wrong, the way laughter echoed too long in empty halls, the way their most beautiful art began to look like screaming faces when you stared too long. They fled. But most of the Eldar couldn't stop, wouldn't stop. They had tasted perfection and found it wanting. They needed more, always more. The entity in the warp grew stronger, hungrier. It learned to mimic their voices, to promise them sensations beyond imagining. It whispered of pleasures so intense they would last for eternity. And the Eldar listened. They gathered in their greatest cities, billions upon billions of immortal beings, ready to experience the ultimate sensation, the final pleasure that would surpass all others. The ritual began at midnight across 10,000 worlds. But what they birthed in that moment of collective ecstasy wasn't pleasure. It was a god of excess and pain, and the thin line between them. Slaanesh opened her eyes for the first time and smiled. The scream that followed could be heard across the galaxy. Vek's fingers traced the ancient wraithbone walls of what would become Kamara's throne room. The psychic residue of a million screams still echoed in the crystalline structure. This wasn't construction. This was desecration. The dark city didn't rise from nothing. It festered from the corpse of something pure. Deep in the webway's labyrinthine passages, Vect had discovered the Eldar's greatest shame, a nexus point where dozens of craft-world pathways converged, a sacred junction that once pulsed with the collective dreams of their race. Now it would pulse with something else entirely. Strip the spirit stones, Vect commanded his followers. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority, even then. The Kabbalite warriors hesitated. Even these fallen souls understood the magnitude of what he asked. Spirit stones contained the souls of dead Eldar. Removing them meant eternal damnation. "My lord," whispered Archon Kilithresh, his scarred face pale with horror. "The ancestors, their souls will be consumed by she who thirsts." Vexed smile was ablaze in the darkness. Precisely. The first spirit stone cracked under the prying. Tools. A ghostly shriek pierced the webway's silence as an ancient soul was torn from its sanctuary and devoured by Slaanesh's hunger. Then another, and another. With each desecrated stone, the junction's holy light dimmed. The wraithbone walls began to weep a substance that wasn't quite blood, wasn't quite tears. The very architecture screamed as its spiritual foundation was corrupted. Vect inhaled deeply, savoring the psychic agony that filled the air like incense. This was the Dark City's true birth, not built on ambition or necessity, but on the systematic violation of everything the Eldar held sacred. Every corridor would be carved from desecrated bone. Every spire would rise on the ashes of ancestral souls. The other cabals would come, drawn by the promise of safety from Slaanesh's hunger. They would build their own districts, their own towers of torment. But they would never understand what Vect understood. Kamara wasn't just a city. It was a wound in reality itself. How many spirit stones remain? Vect asked, watching his followers work with increasing enthusiasm. Kilithresh consulted his data slate, his hands trembling. 700,000, my lord. Maybe more. Vect's laughter echoed through the violated chambers, a sound that would haunt these halls for millennia. But the real horror hadn't even begun. In the twisted spires of Kamara, addiction isn't measured in substances. It's measured in screams. Archon Vect stands before a wall of crystalline torture chambers, each one pulsing with captured agony. The air tastes metallic, iron, and desperation. His withered hands press against the nearest crystal. Inside, a human prisoner writhes in eternal torment, their pain feeding directly into Vekt's ancient soul. The rush is immediate. Color floods back into his pale flesh. His sunken eyes brighten. The crushing weight of she who thirsts, that ever-hungry demon that devours Eldar's souls, retreats for precious moments. But it's never enough. More, he whispers, his voice cracking like old parchment. This is the curse of the Dark Eldar. Every moment of existence is borrowed time, stolen from the suffering of others. Without constant influxes of pain and terror, their souls wither. They age rapidly. They die. In the lower districts, witch cults sharpen their blades on living flesh. The sound of metal scraping bone echoes through narrow corridors. Each cut must be precise. Too quick, and the victim dies before yielding sufficient anguish. Too slow, and the torturer starves. Kabbalite warriors return from raids, their ships heavy with screaming cargo. Families torn from peaceful worlds. Children who will never see daylight again. Their terror becomes currency in Kamara's twisted economy. The Dark Eldar don't choose this existence. They're trapped by it. Vekt remembers the old empire, before the fall, when his people commanded galaxies through technology and art. When they were gods among mortals, creating wonders that spanned star systems. Now they're parasites. He watches a young Drukhari noble take her first taste of captured suffering. Her eyes roll back in ecstasy as borrowed life floods her veins. She's beautiful in that moment, radiant with stolen vitality. She's also doomed because the hunger never stops growing. What satisfies today will feel like starvation tomorrow. The doses must increase. The methods must become more creative, more extreme. Vekt has lived for millennia on this diet of anguish. He's watched countless generations of his people descend into madness, chasing ever greater heights of cruelty just to feel alive. The irony burns like acid in his throat. They became monsters to escape damnation. But as he stares at his reflection in the torture crystal, watching borrowed youth fade from his features, one question haunts him. What's the difference between the two? The Eldar Empire stretched across 1,000,000 worlds. Perfect beings in perfect cities, where every desire could be satisfied with a thought. But perfection breeds boredom. In the crystal spires of Kamara, noble houses competed in increasingly elaborate displays of excess. What began as art became obsession. What began as pleasure became pain. Lady Aurelia Vekt stood in her torture gallery, watching a human slave writhe against silk restraints. The screams echoed off walls lined with living paintings, canvases of flesh that wept tears of liquid gold. More, she whispered to her attendants. I want to hear the soul crack. The scent of burning incense mixed with copper blood. Temperature-controlled chambers shifted from Arctic cold to desert heat, each degree calculated to maximize suffering. The slave's skin blistered, then froze, then blistered again. This wasn't cruelty. This was worship. The Eldar had discovered that intense emotion, especially agony, created ripples in the warp. These psychic echoes fed something vast and hungry, stirring in the immaterium. Something that whispered promises of even greater pleasures. Across the empire, torture became ritual. Pain became prayer. In the Cabal's private chambers, children learned to flay skin in perfect spirals. Artists competed to see who could keep a victim conscious longest while removing their organs. Scientists developed new nerve pathways to amplify suffering. the marble floors of paradise grew slick with blood. What the Eldar didn't understand was that each scream, each drop of spilled blood, each moment of exquisite agony was feeding their own destruction. In the warp, something monstrous was taking shape. Born from their collective depravity, she who thirsts was learning to hunger. The entity that would become Slaanesh absorbed every sensation, every twisted pleasure, every creative act of cruelty. It grew stronger with each passing century, fed by an entire civilization's descent into madness. Lady Vex pressed her palm against the slave's forehead, feeling the terror pulse beneath the skin. The psychic feedback sent shivers of ecstasy down her spine. "Do you feel that?" she asked her court. "Something wonderful is coming." The nobles nodded, their eyes reflecting the same hungry gleam. They could sense it too, a presence growing in the darkness between stars, promising pleasures beyond imagination. None of them realized they were creating their own executioner. The birth pangs of a chaos god would tear reality itself apart. But that revelation still lay centuries ahead. For now, the Eldar simply smiled and reached for sharper knives. The screams of dying gods still echoed through the galaxy when the survivors made their choice. Vex stood at the threshold of the webway portal, his armor slick with the blood of lesser Eldar who had opposed him. Behind him, the last remnants of Kamara's nobility clutched their stolen treasures. The ancient pathways stretched before them like arteries of shadow. Here, in the spaces between reality, they could hide from she who thirsts. But hiding wasn't enough. "We will not merely survive," Vecht whispered, his voice carrying through the crystalline corridors. "We will thrive." The construction began immediately. Slave gangs hauled massive spires of bone and metal through the twisting passages. The air reeked of fear sweat and burning flesh as thousands died to raise each tower. Vecht watched from his growing palace as the dark city took shape. Every scream was music. Every death was currency. The webway itself seemed to recoil from their presence. Ancient Eldar had built these passages as highways of light and wonder. Now they pulsed with malevolent energy, corrupted by the very souls they sheltered. "Master," an Archon approached, his face a map of ritual scars. "The outer districts are complete. We have space for 10 million slaves." Vecht's smile was a blade in the darkness. Not enough. The expansion never stopped. Kamara grew like a cancer through the webway, consuming pocket dimensions and forgotten realms. Each new district brought fresh horrors, gladiatorial arenas where hope went to die, laboratories where pain became art. The temperature dropped as they delved deeper into the ancient paths. Ice formed on the walls, but it wasn't from cold. It was from the absolute absence of warmth, of mercy, of anything resembling compassion. Slaves worked until their fingers bled, then worked some more. The lucky ones died quickly. The unlucky became the building blocks of Vecht's vision, their bones ground into mortar, their screams woven into the very foundations. "How many have we taken this cycle?" Vecht asked, watching a fresh shipment of terrified humans being herded through the gates. 50,000, my lord. From 17 different worlds. The number meant nothing to him. They were resources, nothing more. Fuel for the engines of suffering that would keep Slaanesh at bay. But as the dark city grew, so did something else. Something Vecht hadn't anticipated. The other Archons were watching him, learning from him, and some were beginning to hunger for more than just survival. That was just the beginning. In the deepest pits of Kamara, where even shadows fear to linger, a slave child learned the first law of survival. Pain is currency. And Asdrubal Vecht was about to become very, very rich. Born into the lowest caste of Dark Eldar society, Vecht's early years were measured not in birthdays, but in beatings survived. The taste of his own blood became as familiar as breathing. His masters believed they owned him. They were wrong. While other slaves wept in their chains, Vecht watched. He memorized every cruel word, every careless gesture, every moment of weakness. His mind became a weapon sharper than any blade the Dark Eldar had ever forged. The first noble to underestimate him was Lord Zelian. The arrogant Kabbalite made one fatal mistake. He taught Vecht to read. Those ancient texts didn't just contain knowledge. They contained secrets, names, bloodlines, scandals buried for millennia. Vecht's first kill wasn't with poison or blade. It was with words whispered in the right ears at the perfect moment. Lord Zelian's own allies tore him apart in the arena, never knowing a slave had orchestrated their master's downfall. But this was just practice. Vecht's true genius lay not in murder, but in manipulation. He turned the Dark Eldar's greatest strength, their paranoia, into their weakness. Every noble house harbored ancient grudges. Every cabal nursed secret hatred for their rivals. Vecht became the match that lit those fires. He whispered lies that felt like truth. He forged evidence of betrayals that never happened. He made enemies of allies who had stood together for thousands of years. The great houses of Kamara began to devour each other, and in the chaos, a former slave quietly gathered power. The smell of burning noble estates filled the air. The screams of dying aristocrats echoed through crystal spires. And through it all, Vecht smiled. When the dust settled, only one cabal remained standing. The cabal of the Black Heart, led by a former slave who had rewritten the very laws of power in the Dark City. But Vecht's hunger was far from satisfied. Ruling Kamara was just the beginning. He had tasted ultimate power, and like all Dark Eldar, he craved more. The question wasn't whether he would expand his empire. The question was how many worlds would burn in the process? Because what Vecht did next would make his rise to power look like child's play. In the deepest shadows of Kamara, where even the Dark Eldar fear to tread, the homunculi practice their ancient art. These are not warriors. They are something far worse. Homunculus Vecht the Flesh Weaver runs his fingers along the chrome surgical table. The metal is warm, always warm from the last subject. His laboratory stretches into darkness, a cathedral of agony built from living bone and pulsing sinew. The walls breathe, the floor weeps. Every surface tells a story of transformation. Pain, he whispers to his newest apprentice, is the only honest emotion. The apprentice nods, though his hands shake. Even among the Dark Eldar, the homunculi inspire dread. Vecht gestures to the writhing forms suspended in glass cylinders. These were once proud Eldar warriors. Now they are something else. We do not simply torture, he explains, his voice like silk over razors. We improve. The smell of antiseptic mingles with something organic, something wrong. A scream echoes from the operating chamber, not of death, but of unwanted life, of flesh forced into impossible shapes. The homunculi have transcended mortality through pain. They die, yes, but death is temporary. Pain is eternal. Watch closely, Vecht says, selecting a bone saw that hums with dark energy. The apprentice watches as his master begins his work. The subject on the table is conscious, always conscious. That is the point. Every cut is precise. Every modification deliberate. The homunculi do not create monsters. They reveal what was always hidden beneath the skin. The dark Eldar bring them prisoners, volunteers, sometimes themselves. All leave changed. Fear is crude, Vecht explains as he works. Pain is elegant. Pain is truth. The apprentice's stomach turns, but he cannot look away. The transformation is mesmerizing in its horror. Flesh becomes art. Bone becomes sculpture. Screams become symphony. This is not medicine. This is worship. The homunculi serve no god, but sensation itself. They have made themselves immortal through suffering, trading their souls for the ability to reshape reality one nerve ending at a time. Do you understand now? Vecht asks, stepping back from his completed work. The thing on the table still breathes, still thinks, still feels everything. The apprentice nods, though understanding brings no comfort. In Kamara, the homunculi are the architects of nightmare. They build tomorrow from the ruins of today, and tomorrow always needs more materials. Vecht smiles, wiping blood from his instruments. Excellent, because we have 17 more subjects arriving tonight. The screaming echoes through the laboratory halls of Kamara's darkest district. But these aren't screams of pain. They're screams of ecstasy. Deep within the homunculi covens, ancient dark Eldar masters practice an art form that would shatter mortal minds. They are the flesh artists, the bone sculptors, the architects of agony transformed into twisted beauty, homunculus, Urian. Rakarth runs his elongated fingers across a writhing canvas of living flesh. What was once an Imperial Guard captain now resembles something between a spider and a symphony. 8 arms play melodies on exposed nerve endings. The victim's face shows not horror, but rapture. Pain is the purest form of sensation. Rakarth whispers, his voice like silk drawn across broken glass. And I am its greatest composer. The stench of preserving chemicals mingles with the copper tang of fresh blood. Operating tables stretch endlessly through chambers carved from living bone. Each surface holds a masterpiece of surgical impossibility. Here, a space marine's torso has been inverted, his heart beating visibly through transparent ribs. There, a noble's daughter has been gifted with crystalline wings that weep liquid starlight. Her tears fall upward, defying gravity through homunculi science. These ancient beings have transcended death itself through their grotesque artistry. When a homunculus dies, backup organs activate. Redundant nervous systems fire. They return again and again, perfecting their craft across millennia. The temperature drops as Rakarth approaches his greatest creation. A figure suspended in bioluminescent fluid. Neither male nor female, neither human nor alien. It breathes without lungs. It sees without eyes. Every cell has been rewritten, transformed into something that shouldn't exist. Behold, Rakarth announces to his assembled coven, the first true immortal, not through resurrection, but through perfection. The other homunculi lean forward, their modified faces showing something approaching reverence. Centuries of experimentation have led to this moment, the ultimate fusion of science and suffering. But as the fluid drains from the suspension chamber, something goes wrong. The creation's eyes snap open, not the clouded gaze of a test subject, but the sharp intelligence of a predator. It smiles, revealing teeth that shift and change like living metal. Thank you. It speaks with Rakarth's own voice. For teaching me everything I needed to know, the master homunculus staggers backward, his ancient confidence cracking like brittle bone, because he recognizes those eyes. They're his own, but the real horror hadn't even begun. Archon Vect's fingers traced the obsidian edge of his throne as reports flooded in from across Kamaraz's twisted spires. The cabal of the Black Heart had grown too powerful, too comfortable. Other Archons whispered in shadowed alcoves, their breath forming crystalline clouds in the perpetual chill of the dark city. The scent of ozone and spilled vitae hung heavy in recycled air that had never known sunlight. Weakness invites ambition, Vect murmured, watching surveillance feeds flicker across crystalline screens. The first strike came at the hour of thirsting shadows. Cabal poison-tongue warriors materialized through webway portals, their splinter rifles crackling with dark energy. The sound echoed through the nexus of shadows. Like breaking glass, Archon Zarathis led the assault personally, her pale flesh gleaming with ritual scars that told stories of 1,000 torments. Each mark pulsed with bioluminescent pain chemicals, painting her skin in shifting patterns of agony. But Vect had anticipated this. His incubi bodyguards moved like liquid shadow, their claves singing through air thick with the metallic tang of fierce sweat. The clash of ancient blades against modern armor created sparks that illuminated faces twisted by millennia of cruelty. Zarathis felt the first blade pierce her ribs, the cold metal sliding between bones with surgical precision. Her scream was music to Vect's ears, a symphony of betrayal and broken ambition. The battle raged for 7 standard hours. Spires collapsed in cascades of living architecture, their screams joining the chorus of dying warriors. The very walls of Kamarach bled, their organic surfaces weeping crimson tears that pooled in gutters carved from petrified bone. When silence finally fell, Vect stood among the carnage. 3 rival cabals lay shattered. Their archons hung from meat hooks in his personal torture chambers, their minds slowly dissolving under the tender ministrations of his homunculi. But victory came with a price. The Cabal Wars had awakened something in Kamaral's depths. Ancient sensors detected movement in the abandoned subrealms, places where even dark Eldar feared to tread. Vect studied the readings, his enhanced senses detecting the faint vibration of massive machinery stirring to life far below. Something was coming. Something that had been sleeping in the dark city's forgotten heart for 10,000 years. The real war was about to begin. Archon Vect's crimson eyes scanned the tactical display. Thousands of human settlements flicker like dying stars across the hologram. Each dot represents souls, fresh agony waiting to be harvested. "Begin the hunt," he whispers. The words echo through Kamarah's spires like a death knell. In the slave pits below, captured humans huddle together, their terror feeding the city's twisted appetite. But these prisoners are just the beginning. Kabbalite warriors emerge from webway portals like shadows given form. Their armor gleams obsidian black in the dying light of a human world. The air tastes of ozone and approaching doom. Splinter rifles crack. Dark energy tears through flesh and bone. A mother shields her child. The Kabbalites pause, savoring her desperation. Fear tastes sweeter when it's pure. They don't kill her quickly. In Kamarag, homunculus Urian Rakarth watches the raid feeds with surgical precision. His modified eyes catalog each scream, each moment of perfect terror, exquisite. He breathes through vocal cords that were once someone else's. The Great Hunt isn't random violence. It's a carefully orchestrated symphony of suffering. Dark Eldar society depends on this endless cycle. Without fresh souls to torture, their own essence withers. The city itself would crumble into the void, so they hunt. Reaver jet bikes scream through burning streets. Their riders laugh as civilians flee in panic. The sound of terror is music to their ancient ears. Witch cults dance through the chaos. Their blades carve artistic patterns in human flesh. Every cut is calculated for maximum agony. Thousands die. Thousands more vanish into slave ships. Back in Kamara, the captured humans are sorted like livestock. The strong become gladiators. The beautiful become playthings. The rest feed the homunculi's experiments. Archon Vect watches it all from his crystal throne. The screams of the dying echo through his palace like a lullaby. This is how the Dark Eldar survive. Not through honor or nobility, but through the systematic harvest of mortal suffering. Every raid feeds the city. Every scream extends their cursed existence. The human worlds burn. The slaves weep. And Kamarach grows stronger. But in the deepest dungeons of the Dark City, something stirs. Ancient chains rattle in the darkness. Some prisoners, it seems, refuse to break. And that changes everything. The screams echoed through Kamarah's lower levels like a symphony of suffering. Here in the torture pits beneath the Dark City's spires, pain became currency. The Dark Eldar had perfected what others called cruelty into an art form that sustained their very existence. Kabbalite Archon Vect stood at the observation deck, watching his latest acquisition writhe in the neural shredder's embrace. The human captive's agony fed directly into Vect's withered soul, each scream pushing back the gnawing hunger of Slanesh for another precious moment increased the intensity. He whispered to his homunculus. The flesh sculptor's grotesque fingers danced across biomechanical controls. Below, the prisoner's nervous system lit up like burning wire. The smell of ozone mixed with the copper tang of blood. This was survival for the Dark Eldar. Without constant infliction of suffering, their souls would be consumed by the chaos god they had birthed through their ancestors' excess. Every torture session was a desperate feast, every scream a lifeline. The pits stretched endlessly through Kamarah's depths. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy hung suspended in crystalline torture devices, their pain harvested like crops. Mon-Ki humans, proud Tau warriors, even captured space marines, all reduced to batteries of agony. Vect remembered when this had been different. Millennia ago, before the fall, his people had been the galaxy's most advanced civilization. They had reached heights of art, science, and culture that made current imperial achievements look primitive. Then came the excess, the hedonism, the birth of she who thirsts. Now they were parasites, feeding on others' pain to avoid their own damnation. The homunculus leaned closer, his voice a wet whisper. My lord, the subject's pain receptors are approaching maximum threshold. Much more, and the experience will become mundane. Vect nodded. Diminishing returns were always the problem. The Dark Eldar had learned to stretch suffering across weeks, months, even years. Too much too fast, and the victim's mind would break, robbing them of the exquisite awareness that made their agony so nourishing. Reduced to maintenance levels, Vect commanded. We'll resume tomorrow. As the prisoner's screams faded to whimpers, Vect felt the familiar emptiness creeping back. The hunger that could never truly be satisfied, only temporarily sated. He turned to leave, then paused. Something was wrong. The other prisoners had gone silent, but the real horror hadn't even begun. In the deepest chambers of Kamarah, where screams echo like prayers, the homunculi practice their art. These ancient Dark Eldar have transcended death itself. Their flesh writhes with impossible modifications. Extra limbs sprout from spines, eyes cluster like grapes across stretched skin. The air reeks of formaldehyde and terror. Urian Rakarth, the sculptor of torments, runs skeletal fingers across his latest creation. What was once an Imperial Guard captain now hangs suspended in crystalline fluid. Its nervous system pulses with bioluminescent agony. Pain is the only truth, Rakarth whispers, his voice like grinding bone. Everything else is illusion. The homunculi covens operate as twisted medical guilds. They trade in suffering like currency. A perfectly preserved scream costs more than a planet's ransom. Their laboratories stretch for miles beneath the dark city. Vat-grown horrors bubble in nutrient tanks. Surgical tables gleam under cold light. The temperature never rises above freezing. Preservation requires precision. But here's where the horror becomes something else entirely. The homunculi don't just torture for pleasure. They're scientists, researchers. They genuinely believe they're advancing knowledge through their abominations. In their minds, every flayed nerve teaches them about consciousness. Every rebuilt body reveals secrets of existence. They see themselves as scholars, not monsters. Master Zarathus demonstrates this philosophy to his apprentices. He dissects a living Tau diplomat while explaining neural pathways. His voice carries the tone of a university professor. Notice how hope dies in stages. He lectures, pointing to synaptic responses. First denial, then bargaining, finally acceptance. Each phase produces unique biochemical signatures. The apprentices take notes on flesh-bound tablets. This isn't mindless cruelty. It's methodical, academic. They publish their findings in journals written on human skin. They hold conferences where they present new torture techniques like medical breakthroughs. The most disturbing truth? Their research actually works. Homunculi can resurrect the dead, cure diseases, extend life indefinitely. Their knowledge of biology surpasses any Imperial Medicae by millennia. They could heal the galaxy's suffering. Instead, they create more. Rakarth once saved a dying child, only to spend centuries perfecting new ways to make her suffer. The girl, now ancient and broken, still calls him Doctor with genuine gratitude. He gave me forever, she whispers through reconstructed vocal cords. Even if forever hurts. The homunculi covens represent the Dark Eldar's ultimate perversion, the corruption of healing into harm. They possess godlike power over life and death. But what drives beings who've already conquered mortality to continue their endless experiments? The answer lies deeper than mere sadism. In the blood-soaked arenas of Kamarang, death isn't just inevitable, it's choreographed. The Wyches of the Cult of Strife move like deadly dancers across sand already dark with yesterday's carnage. Their pale skin gleams under the sickly light of captured stars, each movement precise as a surgeon's blade. But these aren't healers. Lady Lelith Hesperax leads them, her perfect features unmarred by the violence she orchestrates. She watches from her throne as her disciples prepare for tonight's performance. The air tastes of copper and anticipation. The crowd above roars. 10,000 Dark Eldar packed into the amphitheater's obsidian tiers. They've come to feed, not on food, but on suffering. Each scream, each moment of terror, each final breath sustains their dying souls for another day. The first gladiator enters the arena. He's human, captured from some distant world whose name no longer matters. His chains clank against the stone as he stumbles forward, squinting in the harsh light. The crowd's laughter echoes like breaking glass. The witches circle him slowly. They could kill him in seconds. Their razor-sharp weapons could end this before he draws another breath. But where's the art in that? Where's the exquisite agony that feeds their master's hunger? Instead, they dance. One witch steps forward, her blade singing through the air. It kisses his shoulder, just deep enough to draw blood, not deep enough to disable. The human cries out, stumbling backward into another witch's waiting arms. She spins him like a dance partner before her knife finds his thigh. The crowd leans forward, their ancient eyes bright with hunger. Each drop of blood, each sob of pain, flows into them like wine. They feel young again, alive again. The human falls to his knees. But this is only the opening act. Lilith rises from her throne, her movements fluid as mercury. She descends the arena steps, her bare feet silent on the blood-slicked stone. The crowd falls silent, sensing something special approaching. She approaches the dying human with the tenderness of a lover. Her hand caresses his cheek as tears stream down his face. For a moment, something almost like compassion flickers in her perfect features. Then her fingers find his throat. But tonight, Lilith has something else in mind. Something that will make even the jaded nobles of Kamara gasp in appreciation. The arena doors grind open once more. The screams echoed through 10,000 spires as reality itself began to tear. Kamara, the dark city that had existed in the webway for millennia, was dying. The ancient dimensional barriers that kept the city stable were collapsing, one by one. Archon Vect stood on his obsidian balcony, watching entire districts vanish into swirling voids. The air tasted of ozone and terror. Below him, millions of dark Eldar fled through crumbling streets as their twisted paradise dissolved around them. "My lord," his lieutenant whispered, voice cracking with fear. "The outer rings are gone. The webway portals are sealing themselves." Vect's pale fingers gripped the railing until his knuckles turned white. For the first time in 10,000 years, the supreme overlord of Kamara felt something he had forgotten existed: fear. The Great Disjunction had begun 3 days earlier. A failed experiment by the Homunculi Covens, an attempt to merge demon essence with webway technology. They had promised Vect unlimited power, a way to expand Kamara beyond the confines of the ancient Eldar pathways. Instead, they had torn a hole in the very fabric of their reality. Demons poured through the breaches like living nightmares. Coronate blood letters carved through dark Eldar warriors with contemptuous ease. Slaneshi horrors danced through the torture chambers, delighting in the exquisite irony. The hunters had become the hunted. Vect watched a massive spire, home to 50,000 souls, simply cease to exist. One moment it stood proud against the artificial sky. The next, empty space. The Dark Eldar had built their civilization on suffering. They had fed on pain for millennia, believing themselves above consequence. Now the universe was collecting its debt. "Evacuate the core districts," Vect commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Seal the primary webway gates. We retreat to the innermost rings." But as he spoke, something impossible happened. The temperature dropped 30 degrees in seconds. Frost began forming on the obsidian walls. Vect turned slowly, dread pooling in his ancient stomach. Standing behind him, wreathed in, impossible cold and shadow, was a figure that should not exist. Could not exist. An Eldar Phoenix Lord, one of the legendary heroes of the craft worlds. But this one was different. Wrong. Its armor was cracked and bleeding, its eyes hollow voids. "Hello, cousin." The figure spoke with a voice like breaking glass. "Did you miss me?" Vect's blood turned to ice as recognition dawned. But what happened next would shake the very foundations of Dark Eldar society. As Drubael Vect stood in the shadows of the Dark City's highest spire, watching the carnage below with cold satisfaction. The scent of burning flesh and spilled blood drifted upward on the stale air. For 3,000 years, he had played the long game. Every betrayal, every alliance, every calculated murder had led to this moment. The other Archons thought they understood power. They measured it in slaves captured, in territories claimed, in the screams of their enemies. Vect knew better. True power wasn't taken. It was inherited. He pressed his pale fingers against the viewing portal, feeling the cold metal bite into his skin. Below, the noble houses of Kamara tore each other apart in a frenzy of ambition and spite. Exactly as he had orchestrated. The cabal of the Black Heart had started as nothing more than a collection of outcasts and criminals. Vect himself had been born in the lowest depths of the Dark City, where even the rats fought for scraps of rotten meat. But he had learned something the nobility never could. When you have nothing, you have nothing to lose. The first noble house fell on a Tuesday. House Zalian, proud inheritors of pre-fall glory, reduced to ash and memory in a single night. Their Archon's head now decorated Vext's trophy room, eyes still wide with disbelief. The second fell to betrayal from within. Vext's whispered promises had turned brother against sister, lover against beloved. The screams had lasted for days. By the 10th house, the pattern was clear. But the remaining nobility couldn't stop themselves. Pride was their weakness, and Vect wielded it like a blade. He turned from the window, his reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. The taste of victory was already bitter on his tongue. Power, once achieved, demanded constant feeding. The intercom crackled to life. "My lord, the final noble house has fallen. House Ilithian is no more." Vect smiled, the expression never reaching his ancient eyes. "Send word to the surviving cabals. There will be a gathering in the Arena of Sorrows tomorrow at dusk." "What shall I tell them, my lord?" Vect's fingers traced the scarred surface of his command throne. 3 millennia of scheming had brought him here. But in the twisted realm of Kamara, reaching the top only meant you had further to fall. Tell them their new supreme overlord wishes to discuss the future. But as his subordinates' footsteps faded into silence, Vect wondered if he had finally climbed too high. In the Dark City, absolute power meant absolute isolation, and in the shadows, something was already moving against him. The year was M25. The Eldar Empire stretched across 1,000,000 worlds. But in the webway's deepest chambers, something was stirring. Archon Vect remembers that day. The day reality itself began to tear. The screaming started in the outer sectors. He would later whisper to his most trusted Kabalites. Not the screaming of victims, the screaming of space itself. The Eldar had grown complacent. 10,000 years of absolute power. 10,000 years of believing themselves untouchable. They were wrong. In the warp, their collective psychic excess had been building. Every act of hedonism, every moment of cruelty, every breath of their twisted existence had been feeding something hungry. The first rifts opened above Kamara's noble spires. Reality didn't just crack, it shrieked. The sound was like glass being ground into flesh, amplified across dimensions. Eldar nobles, mid-feast, looked up to see their crystalline towers beginning to bend. Not break, bend, as if space itself was becoming elastic. The wine in our goblets turned to mercury. One survivor would later testify before the homunculus covens. The air tasted of copper and screaming. Then came the births, not of children, of nightmares. From every shadow, every reflection, every surface that had witnessed Eldar cruelty, things began to emerge. twisted amalgamations of their own sins given form. Vecht watched from his fortress as his own reflection stepped out of a mirror. But this reflection moved wrong. Its smile was too wide. Its eyes held the accumulated pain of every soul he'd tortured. It spoke with my voice, he remembers. But the words were every scream I'd ever caused. The great disjunction had begun. Reality was rejecting the Dark Eldar like a body rejecting poison. Architects of agony found their own designs turned against them. Torture chambers became wombs for horrors that defied description. Pain engines gave birth to entities that fed on suffering itself. The webway, their sanctuary for millennia, began to collapse inward. Ancient pathways that had connected their empire started folding like origami made of screaming space. Kamarag's population of billions watched their city eat itself. But the true horror wasn't the physical destruction. It was the realization that this wasn't random. This wasn't chaos. This was justice. Every twisted soul they'd claimed was demanding payment. Every act of cruelty was being returned with interest. The Dark Eldar, masters of pain, were about to learn what real suffering meant. But Vecht had noticed something the others hadn't, something that would change everything. The screaming wasn't random. It had a pattern. In the deepest laboratories of Kamora, where screams echo like prayers, the homunculi practice their art. These are not mere torturers. They are sculptors of agony, architects of impossible flesh. The scent of preserving chemicals mingles with blood. Ancient surgical tools gleam under, flickering bioluminescent strips. Each instrument has tasted 1,000 different species. Urian Rakarth stands before his latest masterpiece. What was once an Imperial Guard captain now writhes as something else. Multiple hearts beat in rhythm. Eyes blink from impossible angles. Pain is the only honest emotion. Rakarth whispers, his own body a patchwork of stolen organs and grafted limbs. The homunculi have transcended death itself. For 10,000 years, they have cheated oblivion through resurrection contracts. Each death becomes merely an inconvenience, a temporary setback in their eternal experiments. Their laboratories stretch through Kamaral's bowels like a cancer. Vat-grown horrors bubble in nutrient tanks. Surgical theaters echo with the music of bone saws and flesh weavers. But the homunculi's greatest creation isn't any single monster. It's the grotesques. Once, these hulking abominations were proud warriors, Dark Eldar who failed their masters, or simply drew the wrong attention. Now they lumber through the dark city as living warnings. Muscles bulge beneath stitched skin. Crude weapons replace severed limbs. Their minds, what remains of them, scream silently behind vacant eyes. The process takes months. Every nerve ending mapped, every pain receptor enhanced. The subject's consciousness preserved just enough to understand what they've become. "We are gardeners," explains Homunculus Belephus, stroking a writhing tendril that was once someone's spine. "We cultivate suffering like others grow flowers." The Dark Eldar fear many things, but they fear the homunculi most of all, because the homunculi remember everything. Every slight, every debt, every moment of disrespect. And in Kamarok, everyone eventually needs their services. The resurrection contracts ensure loyalty through terror. Cross a homunculus, and your next death might not lead to revival. Instead, you might wake up as someone else's experiment. Your consciousness trapped in flesh that no longer obeys you. Your voice stolen, replaced by mechanical clicking. Your identity dissolved into someone else's masterpiece. Rakarth surveys his domain with pride. Centuries of work line these halls, each horror a testament to his skill. But tonight, something feels different. The Vox channels crackle with unusual chatter. Cabal movements, whispered rumors of something stirring in the city's heart. Rakarth's enhanced hearing catches fragments. The Archon's plan, ancient bargain, the real enemy. He pauses, surgical blade halfway to his latest subject. For the first time in millennia, Urian Rakarth feels something he thought he'd excised from his soul. Curiosity. But what he discovers next will make even the master of horrors question everything he believes about pain. The screams echo through the underhive of Tertius Prime. Sister Magdalena presses her back against rusted metal, bolt pistol trembling in her grip. The stench of ozone and burned flesh fills her nostrils. Something moves in the shadows above. The Dark Eldar have evolved their ancient art of suffering into something far more refined. Where once they simply raided for slaves, now they orchestrate symphonies of terror across entire sectors. Archon Vecta's cabal of the Black Heart operates from Kamarag like a cancer metastasizing through reality itself. Their raids pierce the veil between dimensions, striking imperial worlds with surgical precision. Magdalena hears the whisper of anti-grav engines. Her skin crawls as she remembers the briefing. They don't just take prisoners anymore. They take experiences. The Homunculi have perfected technologies that harvest pain itself, bottling agony like vintage wine. Each scream becomes currency in their twisted economy. A shadow falls across her hiding place. On the forge world of Metallica, an entire hive city vanished in 17 minutes. No bodies, no blood, just empty corridors and the lingering taste of fear in the air. The survivors spoke of beings that moved like liquid darkness, their laughter sharp as broken glass. They described weapons that didn't kill, they unraveled. Magdalena's Vox crackles, static, then silence. The Dark Eldar don't age like mortals. Each raid extends their unnatural lives, feeding their souls with stolen vitality. They are vampires of sensation, addicts of suffering. She sees them now. 3 figures descend on gossamer wings, their armor reflecting light like oil on water. Splinter rifles gleam in their hands, loaded with toxins that keep victims conscious through unimaginable torment. The lead warrior removes her helmet, pale skin stretched over alien bone, eyes like chips of obsidian. Magdalena raises her weapon. The Dark Eldar's mouth curves into something that might have been a smile 10,000 years ago. Now it's just another instrument of cruelty. Your fear tastes like copper and desperation. She purrs in Gothic, her voice honey over broken glass. Magdalena's finger finds the trigger. But the Drukhari warrior isn't looking at her anymore. She's looking past her, at something else entirely. Something that makes even a Dark Eldar's expression shift from hunger to genuine concern. Magdalena turns slowly. The corridor behind her isn't empty anymore. Archon Vex stands before his mirror of living flesh. The surface writhes, screams echo from within. He touches his face. Still young, still perfect. The cost? 10,000 souls devoured in the last solar cycle alone. My lord, whispers his homunculus. The raids grow more desperate. Our warriors take greater risks. Vex's reflection shows the truth. Beneath his flawless skin, something withers. Something dies. The Dark Eldar are trapped in an equation written in agony. Each moment of existence demands payment. Each breath costs another's scream. In the deepest vaults of Kamara, ancient records speak of a different time. When the Eldar felt joy without pain. When pleasure didn't require torture. But those days are dust. Slaanesh stirs in the warp, The Dark Prince tastes every Dark Eldar's soul. Waiting, hungry, the moment they stop feeding on suffering, their souls are forfeit. We could try the old ways, suggests a young Cabalite. Perhaps redemption. Vekt's blade opens the warrior's throat before the word is finished. Redemption is death, Vekt hisses. Blood pools on obsidian floors. Hope is poison. The corpse twitches. Even in death, it feeds the city's hunger. This is the Dark Eldar's curse. They remember what they were. They know what they could become. But the path back is blocked by their own necessity. Every raid that keeps them alive makes them more monstrous. Every torture that preserves their youth damns them deeper. In the Arena Mortis, gladiators die for sport. Their pain extends Dark Eldar lives by precious hours. In the flesh pits, homunculi craft new horrors. Each scream is currency. Each violation, sustenance. The Dark Eldar have become addiction incarnate. They are the drug and the user, the poison and the cure. Vekt watches his city through crystalline windows. 1,000,000 spires pierce the darkness, each one built on bones, each one maintained by misery. My lord, another servant approaches. The raids on the imperial world of Tertia 7. The harvest was insufficient. Vekt feels it immediately, the hunger gnawing at his soul, age creeping through his veins like ice. Double the rates, he commands. Triple them. But my lord, the risks. The risk is irrelevant. Vekt's eyes burn with desperate fury. We are immortal. We are eternal. We are... He stops. In his reflection, for just a moment, he sees something else. A glimpse of what he was before the fall. Before the hunger. Before the endless, screaming need. The image fades. The monster returns. But the question lingers in the darkness of Kamara. What if there was another way? Archon Vekt's pale fingers traced the holographic star map. Each glowing point represented a world. Each world a hunting ground. The scent of ozone filled the command spire as dimensional gates tore reality apart. Through these wounds in space, the Dark Eldar fleet emerged like predators from nightmare. Their first target, Meridian Prime. Population, 12 million souls. The Imperial Guard garrison never saw them coming. Dark Eldar raiders moved like liquid shadow, their anti-gravity skimmers silent as death. Splinter rifles whispered through the air, each shard coated with neurotoxins that kept victims alive but paralyzed. Commander Hayes watched his men collapse around him, their screams trapped in frozen throats. The raiders weren't killing them, they were harvesting them. Please, Hayes gasped as pale hands dragged him toward the webway portal. Just kill me. The Drukhari smiled. Death was mercy. Mercy was weakness. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Agre world Talassa fell in 17 minutes. The mining colonies of Zirion lasted barely longer. Each raid surgical, precise, devastating. But this wasn't random violence. Every captive served a purpose in Kamara's twisted economy. Children became playthings for the homunculi. Adults fed the gladiatorial arenas. The strong became slaves. The beautiful became trophies. Witch cult strife descended on the shrine world of benediction like angels of torment. Sister Superior Magdalena fought with righteous fury, her bolt pistol barking prayers of destruction. But for every raider she killed, 3 more emerged from the shadows. The witches moved like dancers, their razor-sharp hair whips leaving crimson trails through the air. They weren't just warriors. They were artists, and pain was their medium. Magdalena felt the neural shredder's pulse tear through her mind. Her last coherent thought was a prayer. Her captors laughed at her faith. In the webway tunnels between raids, the Dark Eldar counted their prizes. thousands of souls destined for the torture chambers, hundreds of exotic specimens for the flesh laboratories, dozens of psychers whose screams would power their darkest rituals. Archon Vex studied the reports with cold satisfaction. Each successful raid bought them more time before She Who Thirsts claimed their souls, more time to perfect their cruelty. But as the fleet prepared for their next hunt, something stirred in the deep web. Ancient sensors detected movement in the void. Something vast, something patient, something that had been waiting for them to make a mistake. The real horror hadn't even begun. Archon Vex stands before the crystalline mirror, watching his reflection flicker between youth and decay. For 10,000 years, he has ruled the Dark City. For 10,000 years, he has fed on suffering to stave off the hunger that gnaws at his soul. The mirror shows truth. Beneath his perfect skin, something ancient writhes. Immortality, he whispers, his voice echoing through chambers lined with screaming portraits. What a beautiful lie. In Kamarag's twisted spires, the Dark Eldar have achieved what mortals dream of, eternal life. But eternity, they've learned, is not a gift. It's a curse. Vex's fingers trace the mirror's surface. Each touch leaves frost that melts into crimson tears. He remembers the fall, that moment when his people's hedonistic empire birthed a god of excess that devours Eldar souls, Slanesh. The thirsting god, always hungry, always waiting, the Dark Eldar escaped their dying empire. But they brought their damnation with them. Every moment of their existence, She Who Thirsts feeds on their essence, draining them slowly, inevitably, unless they feed her something else. Vex turns from the mirror to observe his city below. Millions of Dark Eldar move through streets paved with the bones of 1,000 worlds. Each one beautiful, each one dying. They gather in the amphitheaters to watch slaves torn apart by genetically modified beasts. They laugh as captured space marines are flayed alive, their screams echoing through crystalline chambers. The pain of others becomes their sustenance. Every scream pushes back the hunger for another day. We are not monsters, Vex tells himself, watching a group of witches practice their deadly ballet on living targets. We are survivors. But the mirror behind him reflects a different truth. In the lower levels of Kamara, in chambers where even Archons fear to tread, the oldest Dark Eldar sit in meditation. They've lived so long that their bodies have begun to crystallize, becoming living statues that weep tears of liquid agony. They remember when the Eldar ruled the galaxy. They remember joy without cruelty, pleasure without pain. Now they remember only hunger. Vex closes his eyes and feels it stirring. That gnawing emptiness that no amount of suffering can truly fill. The price of immortality isn't death, it's forgetting how to live. A chime echoes through his chambers. His servants announce visitors from the Homunculi covens, bearing news of a fresh raid. New prisoners, new screams, new fuel for their endless hunger. Vex smiles, and for a moment, the hunger retreats. But the mirror behind him shows what he refuses to see. In the twisted spires of Kamara, ancient seers whisper of an ending written in screams. Their prophecies speak not of glory, but of consumption. The very darkness they feed upon grows hungry for its masters. Homunculi pause mid-torture, feeling phantom pains in limbs they've replaced 1,000 times. The smell of ozone fills their laboratories as reality itself begins to fray. She Who Thirsts watches from the warp, patient as eternity. Every soul the Dark Eldar claim only delays the inevitable feast that awaits. Archon Vect stands before crystalline viewing ports, watching slave ships return with diminishing cargo. The galaxy grows harder to harvest. Resistance spreads like infection. We are the apex predators, he tells his court. But even apex predators can starve. The webway itself shows signs of decay. Ancient passages collapse without warning, trapping raiding parties in dimensional voids. The infrastructure of cruelty crumbles. Witch cults notice their audiences growing restless. The same tortures that once drew ecstatic screams now barely raise whispers. Sensation itself grows numb to their touch. In the deepest vaults, mandrakes speak of shadows that move without light. Something hunts the hunters, feeding on their fear as they have fed on others. The cabals turn on each other with increasing desperation. When external prey grows scarce, predators devour their own. The taste of Eldar souls carries a bitter irony, yet still they refuse to change. Still they believe pain can purchase immortality. The prophecies speak of a final raid, not outward into real space, but inward into themselves. When the last scream echoes through Kamarag's halls, when the final drop of agony is extracted, they will face the hunger they've carried all along. She who thirsts will not need to hunt them. They will come willingly, offering themselves as the ultimate sensation, the exquisite agony of their own extinction. Dark Eldar's fate mirrors our own digital age of endless consumption. We scroll through suffering, click on catastrophe, feed algorithms with our attention to pain. Every notification promises sensation. Every feed demands more extreme content to maintain our interest. We've built our own Kamara in cyberspace, a realm where cruelty becomes entertainment, where others' pain becomes our pleasure. The question that haunts both realities remains. When we've consumed everything else, what happens when the only thing left to devour is ourselves? In the darkness between stars and screens, something waits to feed on those who feed on others. Subscribe if you dare glimpse what watches us watch. In the dying light of the 41st millennium, the Dark Eldar endure. Their cities pulse with stolen agony. Their hearts beat with borrowed time. Each raid, each scream, each drop of spilled blood merely delays the inevitable hunger that gnaws at their souls. The irony cuts deeper than any blade. They who once ruled the galaxy as gods now crawl through shadows like parasites. The Eldar Empire's children, reduced to feeding on the pain of lesser beings. Their ancestors' hubris birthed Slaanesh, and now they pay the price in perpetual torment. But here lies the most twisted revelation of all. They could choose differently. At any moment, a Dark Eldar could walk the path of the craft world cousins. They could embrace discipline over indulgence, sacrifice over selfishness. Yet they don't. Not because they can't, because they won't. The addiction runs deeper than survival. It's become identity. They've convinced themselves that cruelty is strength, that compassion is weakness. The very pain they inflict becomes the drug they cannot quit. Vect himself admitted it once, in a moment of rare honesty. We are not victims of our nature. We are its willing architects. The screams echoing through Kamara's spires aren't just from their captives. They're the death cries of empathy itself. Each tortured soul marks another step away from redemption. And perhaps that's the point. In our own world, we witness this same dance daily. The powerful who could choose mercy but select cruelty. The privileged who mistake suffering for entertainment. Every click on violent content, every view of someone else's pain, we feed the same hunger that consumes the Dark Eldar. We tell ourselves we're different, that we're just watching. just curious. But every audience enables the arena. The Dark Eldar's true curse isn't Slaaneish's thirst. It's the knowledge that they choose this existence every single day. They could step into the light, but they've grown addicted to the darkness. So they sail the webway eternal, raiders in the night, carrying their self-imposed damnation like a crown. The question that haunts the void remains. When we consume stories of their cruelty, of their endless appetite for suffering, who exactly are we becoming? Every view is a choice. Every click, a step deeper into the dark. Subscribe if you dare to look deeper into the abyss.